inside lane, get clear in turn one, and come out of that opening hairpin with the lead. The best we've seen is getting into second, and right now into third. That's still a really respectable start for the off-pole man and Isaac Gutierrez, although he falls back a little further. And now, first challenge for the lead. Harley Keeble going to go through and bring Tevin Robbins up to second through turns 1 and 2.
Yeah, I'm not surprised to see Keeble get aggressive.
What's happening, YouTube? Jeff Robbins here. Welcome back. So it's a new year, and I'm thinking we will switch it up a little bit and we'll start looking into the KA100. It's a two-stroke 100cc engine, still grassroots in my opinion, just like the Briggs. So hopefully you guys are okay with that. So this is our KA100 right here, and what we'll do is we're just going to go ahead and put a new piston in it. It's basic top-end engine service. Couple tools we're going to need is we're going to need a way to measure our bore. Couple ways you can do that. You can get one of these gauges here that has a dial indicator on it. This is my newer one. Definitely my preferred way of measuring your bore. When I started out, I was using this guy, and you just put this in the bore and pull it out and then measure it with your calipers. I still double check myself sometimes with that, but this dial indicator gauge is definitely the way to go. You're going to need a little screwdriver to pull out the circlip from the piston that's in the engine. We've got a circlip installation tool right here. We've got a piston punch. We'll use this to put the piston in and push it out. And if you have issues pulling your piston out, because sometimes they do get stuck in there and they're kind of tight, and you're not going to want to put a lot of lateral force on the rod while you're pulling your piston pin out. So you can get a tool like this, and basically you just put this through the piston pin, and then you just back it out by twisting the thing here, and just back the piston out. That way you're not having to bang on it with a rubber mallet or something to get that piston pin out of there if it's a little stuck on you. What else do we got here? So I've got a new piston pin, got a new small end cage, got my piston here, got a bunch of base gaskets, and you're going to need to be mindful. You're not just going to want to throw a base gasket on here, because depending on how many or how few you put on there, that's going to change your squish and your port timing. So you've got to be mindful with that. Make sure that you don't fall outside of the rules once you've got this thing put together. So be careful with how many base gaskets you use. So definitely take your measurements once you're done. And you're also going to need to have a freshly honed cylinder. So I've got my KA cylinder all honed up, measured up, ready to go for the new piston. So when you get your piston, what you'll do is you'll measure your bore, and then you can order your piston based on whatever measurement you get. But when your piston comes, so for example, this piston here is a 48-48. So IAME, they have their pistons so that I think it's 9/100ths of a millimeter smaller than the bore. So while this box reads 48-48, if I pulled the piston out and measure it, it's actually going to read 48-39, because it's actually going to be 9/100ths smaller than what's printed on the box. That's just so that you have enough piston to wall clearance and your piston doesn't seize on you once it starts heating up and expanding. So there's a quick look at all the tools we'll need. First thing we're going to do is we're going to pull the piston out, and there's actually a circlip that goes right in there that holds the piston pin in place, and we've got a little groove right here. So we're just going to get our little screwdriver, try to get behind that circlip and pick it out. Once you start prying on that circlip, though, it will come jumping out of there, so you got to kind of put your thumb over it. But you got to be careful with that too, because I've definitely left a circlip hanging out of my thumb. So you'll just want to double check where the gap in the circlip is, and just make sure you're not putting your thumb right over that little gap. So first thing we'll do, let's go ahead, let's pull this piston out, and then we're going to get some base gaskets on there. We'll install the new piston, and then we'll take some measurements, and we'll go from there. All right, so first thing, let's get that circlip out of there. And that's what the circlip looks like. Just a little rigid wire, and it goes one on each side of the piston pin to hold it in place. So once you've got that out of there, go ahead and get your piston punch. And you only need to remove one because this piston punch, it's small enough to fit through the circlip on the other side. So you only need to worry about tearing one of them out. You'll just put your piston punch in and then just go ahead and push that pin out. Fortunately, this one came out fairly easy. There's our piston pin. That's garbage. Our piston. And the old cage. So all those three pieces, you can go ahead and throw in the trash. What we'll do is we're going to go ahead and get our base gasket on here. And I keep this blue rag in here just so I don't accidentally drop something down into the case. That's really all that's in there for. All right, so let's go ahead. Let's get our small cage out. Go ahead and throw a little bit of 2-stroke oil on it. Put it in. And now what we're going to do, and you never want to reuse your circlips either. So the circlip you pulled out, that's also garbage. Your new piston will come with circlips for you. And your new piston also comes with a ring. So we're going to actually put this ring into the cylinder, and we'll check our ring gap as well. And your new piston will come with 2 new circlips. So what I like to do is, I'm looking at the back of the engine right now, and what you'll notice on the piston is there's an arrow, and this arrow needs to point toward the exhaust. So it's going to go in this way. So what I like to do is, I'm not sure if it's because I'm right-handed or what, but I'll actually put in the circlip that's on this left-hand side first. And all you do is you put your circlip down here into the tool, and this is an IAME tool. Get it down in there. And then you grab the top half and just push it down to the end. Just like that. And then there's this little groove. You can spin the tool around. And then all we're going to do is we're going to drop our circlip in to this side of the piston. And if you're looking, we can see that the gap of the circlip is right here. What I like to do is I like to put the gap on the opposite side of where I know I'm going to be picking this thing out next time I get in here. So I'll put the gap opposite of where that little groove is. And then you just compress your tool and your circlip's installed. So pretty simple. And then we need to get our piston pin. Get a little bit of oil. Oil up your piston pin. And then what I like to do is I like to drop a little bit of oil in my piston as well, right where that pin's going to need to slide through. Because sometimes these are tight. Sometimes they'll drop right in for whatever reason, and then sometimes they're tight. So I like to oil it up. Tends to make it a little bit easier. So I've got my circlip on this side, so I'm going to start my piston pin on this side. See, and look, this one just drops right in there. Like, I don't know why sometimes they're tough and sometimes they're not. So you're going to want to push your piston pin in there right before it wants to start protruding to the inner side of your piston. So get it right up to the edge there. And then what you're going to do is just hold it over the top of the rod. And as you're looking down, you can kind of line it up. And then you're going to want to push it in and get it to go right into that small cage. And just like when you're taking it out, you're not going to want to put any lateral force onto the rod. So hold your piston as good as you can, and then you just got to kind of work it in there. And they can definitely be tough, but once you get it all lined up and it starts going in, they just fall right in. So let's get this guy lined up just like that. And so once you get it like there, just go ahead and grab your piston punch, put it in the rest of the way. All right, and then we'll grab our other circlip, get it in the circlip tool. Check to see where your gap is. And then put your gap opposite of where you're going to be picking it out. Go ahead and put in your second circlip. Just like that. And definitely double check to make sure it's sitting in its groove all the way around. The last thing you want is for this circlip to come out while the engine's in operation. That's definitely going to destroy the top end of your engine. All right. So we've got our piston installed. Simple as that. Next thing what we'll do, let's go ahead. Let's check our ring gap. And I forget exactly what IAME recommends this gap to be. Go ahead and pull your ring out. And then what you're going to notice is right here on the piston, there's a little pin right here. Right there on the front right-hand corner if you're looking at it from the back. So when your ring goes on, that's where your ring gap's going to need to line up. Right like that. There's a little pin, and what that's going to do is keep the ring from spinning while the motor's in operation. So to get these on, basically what I do is I start from one side, kind of get it up underneath the lip, and then as you just back it around the back side of the piston, your ring just falls right in for you, just like that. Perfect. All right, so I'm at a point, I'm going to pull this rag out of here. You shouldn't need it anymore. Mainly just to make sure I don't drop the circlip down there when I'm pulling the circlip out. Definitely have done that a few times. All right, so we're going to go ahead, we're going to put a light application of oil around the piston, and then we'll put a little bit inside the bore as well before we try to put the cylinder back onto the engine. Nice coating all the way around. And then I'll just do the same inside the bore. Alright, so we're looking at this engine from the back. So this is the exhaust side. So what I like to do is I'll start the cylinder on the posts. And then I'll kind of just hold it up top here with my one hand. And then I'll reach under here and grab the piston and try to get my gap lined up with the pin. Then you use the back of your hand to hold the cylinder up as you collapse the pin around the ring around the pin, excuse me, and then you just gotta kind of fill it up into the bottom of the cylinder. Just like that. Go ahead and give the crank a few spins just to make sure everything's still free. Looks good. Okay, so from here, what you're going to want to do is you're actually going to want to take a measurement, and we're going to want to measure our exhaust port timing. And to do that, we're going to need a degree wheel. Let's get our degree wheel mounted. And just go ahead and install the degree wheel loosely for now. We don't need to tighten it down quite yet because we got to get it zeroed out. So you'll need to get one of these little tools. It's essentially just holds the cylinder down to the case. You can also use it to find top dead center if you're doing your timing and you've got the head off and you don't have to go through the spark plug hole. You can use this to set your timing as well. So let's go ahead and get this bolted down to the top of the engine, and I'm just going to use the KA stud bolts that come with the engine. Hold this down. And then here's my pointer. I'm going to install that on this leg. And we'll go ahead and snug these bolts up a little bit. Alright, so what we're trying to measure here is our exhaust port open duration. And here's another tool that I forgot to mention. You're going to need this little feeler gauge, and it's 2/10 of a millimeter thick and then 5 millimeters wide. And that's what they would use to tech you at the track if they were going to tech your port timing. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to rotate the engine in the way that it operates until you see the exhaust port opening. And then what we're going to do is we're going to slide this little feeler gauge above the piston and then out into the exhaust port. And then we're actually going to rotate the engine backwards, and that's going to hold that gauge between the piston and the top of the exhaust port. So once we've got that in there, now we need to zero our gauge, or our degree wheel, excuse me. So holding the piston up against that feeler gauge, you're just going to want to set your degree wheel at 0. Just like that. So if you look down in there, you can see I've got that feeler gauge in between the piston and the top of the exhaust port. Let me open it a little bit so you can see. Oh, and there goes my gauge. But there's the exhaust port opening. So you see that air or the light gap coming through there? That's where you're going to want to insert this gauge and hold it up against the top of the exhaust port. And then from there, get my gauge back in. You're going to see when that's in there, we're lined up right at 0 degrees. So to check your exhaust port duration, we're going to rotate the engine in the direction of operation, and we're going to hold our gauge so it doesn't fall down in there, and then it's going to come to a stop right there. And then we're going to want to check where we fall on our degree wheel, and I'm showing degrees. I'm not sure what the rule book states off the top of my head. I'll definitely put some text up on the screen on where that needs to fall. But where we're at, and if we changed our base gaskets, so if we added more base gaskets, this would actually degree out higher. So say if I added more base gaskets, this might be 1. You need to pay attention to that, and that's where you can fall outside of the rule book if you don't double check this measurement. And that's it for exhaust port. So now we can pull all this stuff off. Okay. All right, so we are essentially installed at this point. We got to get a O-ring for the top end. Hopefully I have some. Install the O-ring just like that. So just to mention real quick, there are copper gaskets you can get. So you can kind of use that to play with your squish. So say you wanted your port timing at a certain place, but your squish is falling outside of your limit, you could actually add copper gaskets here to bring your squish back into spec so that you're not outside of the rules. Just another thing to keep in mind. I don't use them. And to be honest with you, I've pulled the only time I ever see this with a copper gasket is if I open up a brand new engine from IAME. Okay, let's go ahead and get the cylinder head bolted on. Don't forget to put this little holder on. This holds the spark plug wire off the coil. If you forget to put this in, you gotta pull the head off, put it in, and then put the head back on. And to be honest with you, this is definitely take 2 because I forgot to put that on. So we'll go ahead and put our cylinder head on and give it a little jiggle once you get it down there, just to make sure it feels like it's completely seated up against that O-ring and it's not kind of tipped up a little bit. We want that completely flush before we start torquing this thing down. And to get these washers on, easiest way I've found is just put the washers on a little screwdriver, and then just put the screwdriver right on top of the stud, and then just drop your washers down in there. I've got small hands and it's even difficult for me to get these on sometimes. Done. And I torque these down to 15 foot-pounds. Alright, let's go ahead and give the crank a couple spins just to make sure everything's still free. Good to go. So there it is. Alright guys, so top end rebuild on my KA100 is complete. It's a pretty simple job as long as you have all the tools that you need to get it done. If you've got all the right tools, you can totally do it yourself. It's definitely not rocket science putting a piston in a 2-stroke. You'll just want to make sure you get your cylinder honed up real nice, and yeah, just make sure you've got the tools to measure, so you've got all your measurements where they need to be, and you should be good to go. So if you guys want to see more KA stuff, definitely let me know. There's a lot of things we could talk about. We've got ignition timing, we've got squish, we can go over the Tillotson carburetor. So there's quite a few things, plus we can put this thing on the dyno just like we did the Briggs, and tear it up as well. So I appreciate you guys for watching. Plan your race your plan, have a good time at the track.